Hey Bob, I'm so glad we could spend a few minutes together.
Hey Dan, I'm glad you found me. I'm glad you woke me up.
Hey, just out of curiosity, just give us a little quick big background on yourself. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in northern New Jersey, about 50 miles west of New York City, a little country town called Lake Hopatcong. At the time it was a summer resort. Nowadays it's a year-round community.
And did you have a lot of music in your home when you were growing up?
Lots of music. That's all we had was arts of some form, painting, singing. I didn't dance, I didn't sing, did very little painting, but I was a woodworker. I would carve little miniature things when I was a kid, including little guitars. One of my uncles is a fine, classically trained painter. His brother, my other uncle, was the musician of that generation. So between the two, and my father being a cabinet maker, I had lots of music and woodworking influences.
So that's where the woodworking came from, is your dad?
Yes, that was my first exposure to cabinet making, and anything really made out of wood.
And where did the music take you? Did you start having a desire to play yourself?
Well, I did, yes. One of the commonplace occurrence in our family were weekend gatherings with the uncles playing. Good food. My one uncle played mandolin. He was a violinist. Many years as a kid became a mandolinist. Well, they played mandolin as well. The other uncle, the guitar player. So we had guitar and mandolin regularly, and that was my first exposure to music, live music. My uncle that played the guitar played an Archtop guitar. And that's no doubt why I had interest in going in that direction. From those weekend extravaganzas, I had interest in playing the instrument, so I took lessons from my one Uncle Frank, who gave me guitar lessons. Started playing out in little bars and at little private affairs when I was about 11. And always wanted to make a guitar. At the same time, as I was playing, I was also very interested in making them. So at that point in my life, I started making little miniature guitars from scraps of wood that I would find around the table saw in my father's little workshop. And yeah.
That's interesting. What were some of those shaped like? Your own design, or did you emulate other styles?
Well, the first one was a copy of my uncle's guitar, which was a small-bodied, 16-inch body Gretsch, an Archtop F-hole Gretsch, Sunburst. I don't know what the model name was. I don't remember. But anyway, that was my first little miniature.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did you study some of the designs of other guitars early on?
No, I really didn't. At that point in my life, I mean, I was a little kid, and that was the only guitar I'd ever seen or touched. And so my uncle Mike, who was the artist of the family and the guitar player, immediately saw my interest in his guitar, and so he took me aside and showed me the guitar itself, explained how it worked, vibrations and strings and wood, and yeah, I was just interested in making one.
That's neat. One of the cool things about, I think, that experience is you didn't have what some other people create in terms of barriers. You know, with this, it was sort of approachable to you even as a young age that you could make this instrument.
Oh, it was approachable. It was encouraged. You know, it was not, because everybody in my family, my mother's side as well, not just on my father's side, they were all artistic, very creative people. And if any one of us had interest to do whatever that may be, whether it's build a tree fort in the fort, we used to call them forts, the tree house in the woods, or make a guitar, we were encouraged to do so. Yeah.
Did you ever have aspirations that, I mean, did you have thoughts that this idea would lead to what it's led to?
I knew it would.
Really?
Always.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh, that's amazing.
Yeah, that's all I ever had in mind, was making guitars for great players and being the #1 Archtop maker in the world. I mean, whether I achieve that or not is not even the issue. The point is that was my goal.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And later on, as you started developing this concept, what were the challenges that you had to overcome? Like getting your raw materials, figuring out how you were going to do it differently, financially. How was that all set up?
There was no formal approach. There was very little thought, in fact, that went into it. All I knew was that when I wanted to make my first real guitar, not the little miniatures, but a playable instrument for myself, because at the time I was playing out, I just decided to make it. Never gave it much thought. The tools, as far as I was concerned, I had all the tools I needed, which were my grandfather's cabinet making planes and chisels, gouges, and so on. Raw materials, I cut up the kitchen table, and that became the wood. That was my source of wood for the first few guitar necks. Eventually I realized I needed sources of wood and tuning machines and cases and so on. But I would just deal with those issues as I had to. I didn't worry about them. I didn't try to plan too far ahead. I just focused on making that one guitar. After the one, then I focused on making the next two guitars. And it kind of geometrically moved on.
That's interesting. That first guitar, that's the one that has the neck from the kitchen table?
That one and the second, third, and fourth. I think about the first 5 or 6 guitars had pieces of the kitchen table. And my sister's bed. When I ran out of wood from the kitchen table, I cut up my sister's bed and used that. My cousin's bed. And by then I found wood sources.
Yeah, luckily, or the whole house was living on.
My family was delighted. In fact, one of the very first source of wood that I located was in New York City. H.L. Wild. Wildwood was the name of the company. He was one of the suppliers to John D'Angelico. And when I found him, I bought his last 2 European sets, which is cello wood, cello making wood. And those I used for the 2 instruments. And then I began to find other sources of that same wood. I also found sources for domestic woods. And then I started buying wood from Europe directly. One kind of had a lot of stepping stones. One led to another. And I stockpiled as I was able to.
You still have your first guitar?
I do.
Really?
I do.
Still play it?
No. I hide it.
Don't want anyone to see it, huh? When you look back at that first guitar, what in there do you now see as sort of your trait? Is your style even present in that first guitar, or did you have to develop that?
It probably is there. Even that, I haven't really given that much thought, but there's always been a kind of a draw. I've always been drawn towards a delicate, little squiggly, curly ornamentation, but not overly done. For example, on the first guitar, I carved the rear of the headstock. Unlike the guitars of today, I carved just a little scroll work on the back of the headstock. My inlay, which was my first attempt at cutting and inlaying mother of pearl, was a flower, a rose, as a matter of fact, with one little petal, a little delicate stem. I evolved away from that into, but holding on to that in some way. I think I've refined it to some degree. Where today, here's the little flower on the 12th fret. See, it's become a kind of like a trademark, a signature motif, you might say. I incorporate it in some way into most of the instruments that I make, especially nowadays. The few that I personally make, I work those in, and I try to be creative and clever, sometimes humorous, where I locate them.
Well, now you got to give me an example about that.
Well, clever would be, I suppose, that a similar inlay to what we see on the 12th fret. I will occasionally inlay along, right up in about this area where it looks like it's growing out from underneath the neck heel. And on the most recent occasion, and I do variations of that, on the most recent occasion, one of the leaves appears to grow under and weave itself under and out of the purfling line,
Oh.
which had to be done pretty carefully because it was done after the guitar was made. It just weaving it around, little things like that.
Neat.
Fun things. They're challenging, and I enjoy them. And nobody's ever done that, so it kind of adds a little touch of personal, unique, whatever.
Well, one of the things I know that you had mentioned to me once before that's particularly fun for you is doing firsts, doing things that haven't been done before. And I think part of that has to do for you in knowing the history of the Archtop. Did you spend a lot of time at some point in your life really getting to know what the history of the Archtop, who else was doing it, the work of Lloyd Lohr and people like that?
You know, I didn't really find out about Lloyd Lohr until I had been into it for I don't know how many years, maybe a half a dozen years probably. My first influence to a production or marketable and professional instrument really was Gretsch. My father knew one of the plant managers, I don't know what his title was, a manager at the Gretsch factory when it was in Brooklyn. And so when I was a kid and started showing interest in making guitars, he brought me to the factory on a few occasions, and wow, that was quite an experience because there I had an opportunity to see what seemed like thousands of guitars. They may have been 50, I don't know. But no doubt hundreds of guitars, all different shapes and sizes and colors, and all over, every place I looked. Big influence. I remember walking to one point of the factory where there were people doing handwork, hand-shaping necks. There were banjo makers carving leafage on the heel of the neck and on the headstocks and so on. Gretsch was a big influence. When I started making real guitars at the age of 21, I also started doing repair and restoration work. And that's when I really became introduced, you might say, or exposed to people like John D'Angelico, Lloyd Lohr's work, old New York Epiphones. I worked on a lot of those. I had an opportunity to get inside and see and smell them and touch them, and that was very educational for me. There's influence from there, from all of those companies, probably. Yeah.
Is it hard to create your own niche when there are so many other guitars being made?
It was easy. When I started, I was the baby. The other guitar makers were Sam Kuntz in New Jersey, Bill Barker in Peoria, Jimmy DeQuisto in New York. I don't know that there was anybody, probably about it. And they were all older than me and pretty well entrenched in the business of making and selling instruments. So I didn't really have any peers. I didn't have any competition. I never looked at them as competition. They certainly didn't look at me as competition. Not when I started, anyway. But so I had, I was free to run. I had no one to look out, to watch for. It was very easy. And I knew my focus was clear, jazz. I had no distractions whatsoever. Never cared to make any other type of instrument, not even a different style guitar. And I got to know the players early on. I played myself, so I could easily relate to that mainstream jazz player. And I made their instrument a traditional archtop guitar. It may have had my own little personal touches in terms of bindings, inlays, or color, but it was still a traditionally made archtop, just like what had been done, which is what they wanted. That's what they wanted to play. So it really was not difficult. Oh, I mean, it wasn't difficult. I make it sound easy. It was difficult only because at the time the archtop guitar had become a dinosaur. It was not the most popular guitar. Everyone was switching over to electrics. They had to. But there was enough. I didn't need many sales to make a living.
I'd like to get your thoughts on the difference between a handcrafted archtop and one that's manufactured. What's the differences for you?
Well, that's a good question. It's not easy to answer because there are so many levels of handcrafted and so many levels of manufactured. We manufacture, even if it's a one-man show, you're manufacturing something. When I think of manufacturing, I think of a systematic, productive, efficient way of producing a guitar. If it's one man using chisels and gouges, well, then he's manufacturing, hand-making, if you will, those instruments. In the factory environment, they have certainly the advantage of technology in the form of machines and tooling, but there's always hands-on. There's always hands-on. Now, the guitar that I'm holding now is one of my models that is made at the Corona shop by 4 people that I personally train. We use machinery there as well as a lot of hands-on. The tops and backs, for instance, are carved on a machine. The machine operates off of patterns that I carve, that I hand carve and supply them with. I fit the patterns to the machine. I fine-tune them on the machine. Then the machine will carve a rough top and a rough back. Then I train the people that I hand pick to hand graduate those tops and backs. So there's where we have a nice marriage of modern technology with hands-on, true artisan involvement. So as far as I'm concerned, this guitar is as much handmade as I've done. Well, I used to cut fret slots on a table saw using a nice simple fixture. Well, okay, I'm using a machine, but still there's hand work. Now at the shop here in Corona, they use, how do they cut them? You know, I don't even remember. They have 2 systems. They use either a CNC, a computer-controlled router, which cuts each slot with a little router bit, or they have a gang saw. And I don't remember which one they use, which is the shaft with all the blades spaced properly. So there's a machine. But there's hand work also involved, the hand shaping and so on. The inlaying is all done by hand. The cavities are cut by machine, they're cleaned, the inlays are fitted by hand. So it's a marriage of both worlds.
One of the things in your book that I probably misunderstood, according to a guitar friend of mine, is that there is actually a difference between a chiseled arch top and one that is precisionally done by a machine. Did I understand that to be correct? See, I misunderstood it.
Yeah, you know, if a top or back is hand carved properly, and a machined top or back is machine carved properly, there's no way of telling the difference. The advantage to having hands-on, using hand planes and hand scrapers for the final graduations, is that the man behind the tool can use his intuitive skills to fine-tune that plate, that top or back. You follow me? Yeah. If we take the top or back from the machine, no matter how precise it's carved, sand it and make it into a guitar, well, it's hit and miss. Some guitars will no doubt sound very good, some will sound really bad. But if we take that same top and back and then give it to the man on the bench and let him use the skills he was taught to fine-tune that in terms of graduations and bracings, and then you've got the wood at its optimum musical instrument performance. That's the difference. There needs to be hands-on, otherwise, you know. So a factory guitar is when there's no hands-on, or people are just gluing pieces together as they come off in the machine. That would be, to me, factory made.
Have you learned any lessons the hard way in terms of coming up with new ways of putting things together, gluing or machinery and so on, and it just didn't work out?
I think the biggest lesson I learned early on was I used hide glue. There were different glues, of course, different wood glues available to us, The industry standard these days, and which has been for a number of years, is a Franklin Tight Bond. It's an alphatic resin glue that you can buy it in a hardware store. It's great stuff. Well, at one point in time, I was influenced, in the early years, I was influenced a lot by violin making. They use hide glue to assemble a violin because hide glue reacts violently to moisture and climate change. By violently, that's an advantage. You can open up a glue joint on a violin. You could separate the entire instrument with the right probe and pull, or with heat and moisture. The glue softens, or it becomes brittle depending on how you want to approach it, and you can break that joint. Violins are made to be disassembled. Guitars are not made to be disassembled. So, early on, I thought I was doing the right thing by gluing the necks to the bodies using hide glue. That wasn't so bad. I didn't have any difficulty there because my joints were so good that no problem, okay? But I also glued the fingerboards to the neck. That's where I learned the lesson, gluing the fingerboards to the neck with hide glue. Well, on about 6 guitars, I did that, and I was shipping them out of state to hot climates. And the climates on occasion, especially if the player wasn't really careful where he put his guitar, maybe in the trunk of a car for a few days while he's traveling down the desert, and well, it got so hot that the glue would soften and the joint would begin to slip, or the fingerboard would begin to peel away from the neck. And so there were problems there. I was made aware of that, took the guitars back, of course, and fixed them with the proper glue, and that was that. That was probably the biggest lesson I ever learned. No catastrophe. It was an easy fix. Yeah.
Do you remember the first guitar that you made money on?
Yeah, second one.
The second one?
Number 2. I sold it. It was custom made for a player in New Jersey. I made a lot of money on that guitar. I thought I did anyway.
Because it was your mother's kitchen table, right?
The neck was, yeah.
And when did your career get to the point where you started getting your reputation amongst jazz guitarists? It
happened fast, real fast. Again, because I was focused on the jazz guitar, every place I went I was accepted. The guitars were accepted. Even if they weren't right, really right, and even if not everybody liked them, enough of the playing community liked them enough where I was able to move forward, making progress. So not that I was an overnight success, but again, I had no competition. Doors opened. As I began acquiring well-known endorsers, that was a big advantage, of course. I don't know, I mean, there really wasn't a particular time or date when suddenly it all happened. It was a slow burn, gradual, yeah.
In those early days, is there a particular artist that comes to mind that was one of the first to play one and you thought, oh, this is a good idea?
Well, there were a few. There was Bucky Pizzarelli, Chuck Wayne, Johnny Smith. Bucky Pizzarelli and Chuck Wayne were local to me. I lived in New Jersey, so did Bucky. Chuck Wayne lived in Staten Island, but Chuck played in New Jersey a lot. I would frequent the jazz clubs where Chuck was playing. I got to know him quite a bit, quite well, and Bucky as well. So they were major influences. They were inspirational as well. I mean, they didn't have to say anything. They didn't have to play the guitar. All they had to do was sit there on a stool in a dimly lit club and play, and that was all I needed. That was all I needed. I heard the sound. I knew the sound. I knew the feel. I knew the passion that they had. I was blinded by everything else. That's it. That was all I needed. I was lucky. I mean, I really was, because thinking back on it, I had no plan. It just happened.
That must have been cool. Do you remember the first time or so that you heard somebody like Chuck Wayne play your guitar?
I'm not quite sure. When would that have been? I don't remember. I mean, a lot of the guitars that in most cases, when I made a guitar, I shipped it out of state. I didn't make Chuck's guitar until I lived in Florida. Now he's in Staten Island and I'm in Florida. Bucky also. I was living in Florida when I made his guitar. I remember finishing Bucky's guitar, shipping it to him, and then seeing him playing the guitar the following week on the Today Show on television, playing my guitar. That was probably, yeah, I guess if I had to single out one moment of wow, that was the first wow. Well, look at that. National television.
Does it sort of surprise you now that you see in all the guitar magazines that you know, you're the top builder, you're the guy to go to if you're serious about playing jazz guitar? Does that sort of surprise you when you hear those sort of things?
It doesn't surprise me as much as flatter me. Yeah, I mean, it's logical that people want to gravitate towards people that have something to offer them, whether you're a maker or a player, just as players gravitate towards the great players, yeah. No, it's flattering, very flattering.
I wonder if you could address something that we talk about in our museum, and that is the importance of having an F-hole on the guitar. Can you give us your thoughts about what it does to the guitar as opposed to the round sound hole?
All else being equal, okay, an archtop with a round hole as opposed to an archtop with F-holes. Well, the F-hole, which is obviously the two F-holes that we have on this instrument, are positioned in such a way where the top from the neck block to the tail block and all between the F-holes, that top plate vibrates in a certain way, whatever that geometry may be or configuration of vibrations, whatever that may be. We get a sound, we get a balanced sound with the F-holes in these positions, as you see here. Balance meaning literally the low notes, the mid-range, and the highs are all equal in volume and tone. The timbre is the same. It's a challenge on an archtop guitar to make an instrument with big, fat, high notes. The challenge is diminished when you have F-holes as opposed to a round hole. Now, a round hole or an oval hole on the same instrument, as opposed to having F-holes, will have a tendency to give you a stronger bass, a very pretty mid-range, but very thin, tinny notes on the high end. So that's out of balance. Not desirable for a mainstream jazz player or any refined player. Now, here's the contradiction. There are a lot of great players, and I've had the pleasure of making guitars for such great players. The one who comes to mind always is Howard Alden, who likes the look of the oval hole. That's just something he likes. I've made him, I think, 4 guitars, and I think 2 of them are oval holes, the first 2 that I made for him. And when Howard plays them, they're in perfect balance. Go figure. When I play them, they're out of balance. So who knows, you know? An awful lot has to do with the player. A real good player can bring out the best in an instrument. There's no question about it. A bad sounding guitar can sound great in the right hands.
Could you address a little bit about the importance of where the bridge attaches to the top and what exactly that does for the vibration of the guitar?
Yes, well, the bridge, like on any stringed instrument, whether it's a bowed, cello, violin, plucked banjo, or guitar, you need a bridge. All that is, it's a place for the strings to rest. They make contact. The speaking length of the open string extends from that bridge to the nut. And what happens when you pluck a string? The string vibrations are transmitted from the bridge to the top. The top vibrates. The vibrations within the body set the back in motion. The back then vibrates. When the top and the back are vibrating as they should, you have what we have, the voice of the guitar.
So does it matter exactly what woods are used for the bridge itself?
Any hard wood will do. hard maple, or ebony, or rosewood. Ebony is the traditional wood we use on a high-priced archtop guitar. It's traditional, so we stick with it, but there are dozens of Central and South American woods that would work equally as well as some of our northeastern rock maples. Size and shape of the bridge has a tremendous or dramatic effect on the voice of the guitar. If the bridge is too wide, too heavy, too massive in any way, it's going to dampen the voice. It'll deprive the instrument of speaking as it would otherwise. I don't know that you can have a bridge too delicate. I think the bridge simply has to be only big enough to do its job, which is hold the strings up and transmit vibrations. The experimenting that I've done reveals that to me anyway. As you increase size and shape, you're cutting back on the sound.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And does it matter where the bridge is in terms of sound? Could it be higher or lower, or does it have to be just right?
Well, it does have to be mathematically exact with the fret spacing. It's almost like one of the frets. If you were to create a fingerboard or an instrument with frets going from the nut to the bridge, the frets would continue getting closer and closer and closer and closer and closer until finally there's the bridge. So it's part of that equation, that mathematical equation, whatever that may be.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so if you move the bridge back, yeah, you'll change the voice of the instrument for better or worse, who knows, but who cares, because the guitar's going to play so far out of tune, it won't matter. And the same goes for if you move it towards the neck.
That's great. Good explanations. I really appreciate that. That's neat. One other thought, just can you tell us a little bit about the tailpiece and what that means?
Sure. Tailpiece, its function is simply to hold the strings on the guitar. It's a place to anchor the string. That's all it is. The traditional tailpiece on the archtop guitar for many, many years, including the old Gibsons and Angelicos and Epiphones, were all metal, usually a brass, I suppose, and usually large and heavy and ornate, part of the look of the day. One of the things I learned from Chuck Wayne, in fact, was to get away from that completely, get away from metal tailpieces, because he was certain a guitar would sound better if it would fitted with an ebony tailpiece like its bowed cousins, right? So that's what I did. From my first guitar, I made an ebony tailpiece, and unlike there were a few people making guitars that were playing around with the idea and even had a design that they were using, which included an ebony top portion of the tailpiece was ebony with a brass bracket that was then screwed to the end. So that was an improvement over the all brass piece, but it wasn't the optimum design because there was still unnecessary metal. So on I thought, again, with Chuck's influence, I thought, well, let's just use cello tailgut, which is what I used, and attach the tailpiece to the instrument in the same fashion as the cello or violin, with the use of an ebony tailpiece using the cello tail adjuster, which nowadays is a nylon type material. Years ago, I used real gut, like they used on the cello. Now even this is used on the cello. And in this case, since the guitar comes with a pickup, and this pickup is designed for this acoustic archtop guitar, it floats above the top, it does not make contact with the body, we use an end-pin jack. Okay, so we plug in at an end-pin jack. The end-pin jack serves three purposes. It's where we plug in. It has a brass button for a strap, and it's where we loop the tail adjuster to hold the tailpiece in place. On the instruments that have no pickups, I use an ebony button in place of the metal end-pin jack.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What makes the difference between a low-end and a high-end instrument? Is it mostly the material?
right there. It is very much the material and the workmanship. You know, and the material isn't enough. You could take very, very expensive, prized musical instrument grade wood and make a bad guitar out of it if you don't know what you're doing. So it's a combination of both. People, when they spend this kind of money, people like to see pretty flame in the maples. They like to see a nice characteristic straight grain in the spruce. They like to see nice recurving and finishing and so on. So, but those are all cosmetics, but they are important on an expensive guitar. Mostly what makes a good instrument is the workmanship that goes into it. The proper graduations of the top and back plates, the right bracing, the neck shape, neck dimensions. They are what makes it a musical instrument, a tool for the musician. And that really is where it's at. It's an added bonus if you have nice wood without knots.
Like kitchen tables, for example.
Yeah, sure.
Tell us just a little brief thought about this collaboration with Fender.
Okay, my arrangement with Fender is very simple. It's a licensing arrangement whereby I licensed my name and my models to Fender for them to make my guitars. Now, the way it works, 5 years ago when I signed the contract, I went to the factory in Corona and I selected, at the time, 2. Now there are 4 people. I train them personally, and I visit the factory 1 week out of every month to retrain and stay on top of things, to monitor and supervise the construction of each and every guitar. I check every guitar before it's shipped. Everyone passes through my hands. And that's pretty much it. It's a licensing arrangement where they make my guitars, but they make them my way. Nobody has control over my instruments. I don't answer to anybody. I'm in charge of my name. So, and they like it that way. They want it that way, and so do I. So it's the perfect arrangement. Everybody benefits that way.
Do you have an idea now in 2004 how many Benedetto guitars are out there?
You know, I do, not offhand, but I do have a record at home. Every instrument has a serial number, and I do have a log. I think there's about 750 instruments that I've made personally. I'm not quite sure what they're making now in Corona. What those numbers are, I don't know. They make 8 full-bodied Archtops a month in Corona, and in addition to that, they're making I don't know how many electric models. And they're now tooling up to make more electric models and more models that will appeal to a more affordable price point. You know, over the years, I kind of priced myself out of the hands of the player. That was unfortunate. It was just the nature of things. As my prices increased, I began to lose more and more players and acquire more and more collectors. It's fine, but I miss the interplay and the communications with full-time professional players. So now I'm able to do that. Now I'm able to get back into that with Fender's resources, where we'll design and make a real player's instrument at an affordable price.
Do you still believe, as you did when you were a kid, that it's possible in 2004 for a luthier to come up and create their own style in guitar making?
If it were me, I would. Yeah, I believe in that. I believe if somebody wants to do something and has the will to succeed, I don't see any. I mean, this is America. It's possible. Anything is possible. And it should be encouraged more. Yeah, absolutely. We have more great guitar makers today than ever before. We have better violin makers today than ever before. And we know that. Now, everyone knows it. I think everyone knows it.
Yeah, that's interesting. You think we missed anything? Really?
She thinks it's fabulous, folks.
He knows how to harsh critic I am.
Last question then, since you're doing so good. Just your thoughts on the NAMM show. What does it mean to you? Is it essential for you to come? Is it sort of okay? What's your thoughts?
I love it. Not only is it important that I'm here, I think, because I represent my guitars, but I actually enjoy it. I mean, I've been chained to the workbench for so many years. This is the next logical step, I hope. But I have a great time. I meet friends. I stay in touch with friends. I meet new people. I get to show people my guitars. I get to talk about my guitars, which, and that's enlightening to a lot of people who just don't know. What kind of fret are you using, or where did you get that piece of wood, or why this and not that? I love talking about it, so yeah, it works great. I think we should have NAMM shows at least once a month. And everybody should come.
Yeah, but I'm too tired at the end of it.
I know.
Well, this has been a delight. Thank you very much. I do appreciate your time.
Thank you.
It's always great hanging out with your wife.
Oh, yeah.